A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see all of you right here. Now, before we start, a couple of housekeeping announcements that we have in store for you. Now, for those of you just making your way in, we've got lots of seats on your right and on the left as well. So we'd like for you to fill in the seats that we have on the sides as well, yeah? Okay, certainly hope you've been having a great morning meeting friends in the industry as well thus far. Now, we'd like to let all of you know that Wi-Fi is indeed available in this ballroom. Login details can be found on your screens all around you, right there. All right? In line with our sustainability efforts, the SIEW Show Pack brought to you by EDF is now digital. We'd like to let you know that. To find out more about today's agenda, speakers, and sponsors, we invite you to visit the SIEW website at www.siew.sg or scan the QR code on the signs around you. Now, you can also keep updated to the latest news at our SIEW Live blog or our website on SIEW's Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, as you can see on the screens right there. For more interactive sessions today, you may log on to Pigeonhole Live platform. In fact, we'd like for you to embrace Pigeonhole Live today, as we'll be asking you to pose your questions right in there, and our speakers and moderators will take it from there. Okay? Now, this platform allows you to pose questions directly to our speakers, view today's agenda, and give us, of course, your feedback. Now, to do this, simply scan the QR code on screen now or log on to www.pigeonholeLive.at/SIEW2018. I'll also be having all of you to ensure that you have your mobile devices switched to the silent mode, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, SIEW 2018 will begin very shortly. Thank you. We'll be back soon. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Do join me in welcoming our ministers from the ASEAN member states, dialogue partners, ASEAN Secretary General, and Excellencies, and of course, everyone else here at SIEW 2018 rather. A big round of applause, please, everybody. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and welcome to the Singapore International Energy Week, or SIEW 2018. I'm Ravi Nadesan, your host. It is with pleasure now that I invite up on stage Minister for Trade and Industry, Singapore, to deliver the SIEW opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Chan Chun Sing.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you and a warm welcome to the 11th edition of the Singapore Energy Week. This morning, I think we are all gathered here to solve a simple puzzle together. A simple puzzle that has three dimensions that many professionals in the industry have been trying to figure out. How do we reconcile the demand for something that is affordable, reliable, and sustainable? Conventional wisdom says that this is called a trilemma. You can at best have two, but not the third. But today I think we are all gathered here because we believe that the new generation of technology and business model will present opportunities for us to overcome, if not at least to substantially reduce the dilemma, or rather the trilemma. The energy landscape today is undergoing significant shifts in the production, management, and consumption of energy. If we look at energy production globally, the share of renewables in the overall energy mix is increasing due to advances in clean energy technologies and lower costs of deployment. According to IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, global renewable capacity reached 2,179 gigawatts in 2017, representing 167 gigawatt or 8.3 year-on-year growth over 2016. Beyond production, countries need better tools to manage energy, to smoothen the peak and trough in demand and to better balance their load, especially within a 24-hour cycle. The new technologies such as data-enabled systems and energy storage solutions will play an increasingly important role in fulfilling this need. Reducing energy consumption is yet a third area that deserves our attention. How we rolled out smart policies and innovative building designs, how we use new construction materials that will consume less energy are important challenges and opportunities for all of us. These developments present new and exciting opportunities for Singapore. We will step up efforts to invest in new energy production, integrate the way we manage energy, and innovate the way we consume energy to create a more resilient future for all of us. First, let me talk about production. To produce sufficient energy for our needs, we must invest early in our energy infrastructure. There must be enough capacity to meet demand plus some buffer. As more consumers start to demand clean energy, we should also continue to encourage the use of cleaner sources of energy. While renewables are cleaner, solar and wind power can also be intermittent in supply. Hence, the trilemma that we talked about at the beginning of this speech: affordability, sustainability, and reliability. Harnessing renewables is not an easy feat, but it can be made easier with continued international cooperation. Yesterday, at the 36th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, the ASEAN ministers pledged to further enhance energy cooperation amongst member states. I'm very encouraged that ASEAN has also agreed to sign a Memorandum of Understanding with the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. This MOU signals our collective commitment to work with international partners and scale up renewable energy deployment in our region. Today, Singapore relies on imported fuels for the majority of our energy needs. Most of our electricity comes from the burning of natural gas. We face our own unique challenges in deploying renewable energy sources. For example, we do not have hydro or geothermal energy potential, and we have limited land to deploy solar panels. Nevertheless, our own solar capacity has almost quadrupled in the last 4 years, from 33 megawatt peak in 2014 to around 162 megawatt peak today. Just like how Singapore has successfully diversified our supply of water over the years, our next ambitious goal is to enhance our energy resilience to ensure that we are never dependent on any single source of supply. To achieve this, we will need to continually diversify our sources of supply and innovatively maximize our land and space to produce more renewable energy. One such innovation is JTC's Solar Land Program, which aims to maximize the use of vacant land by installing solar panels on an interim basis. JTC has also launched the Solar Roof model, which allows solar panels generated from the rooftops of JTC's industrial building to be fully exported to the power grid. I'm pleased to announce that the Solar Land and Solar Roof programs together will achieve 100 megawatt peak of installed solar capacity by 2030. Today, we are also piloting the deployment of floating solar panels on water reservoirs. With advances in technology, we also hope to be able to use vertical building surfaces to harvest solar energy. To unlock the potential of renewables to meet our energy objectives, we must continue to invest steadily in R&D and infrastructure and build up capacity ahead of time. This will contribute towards our goal of achieving 1 gigawatt peak of solar capacity beyond 2020. Second, let me talk about better management through integration. We need to explore solutions to better integrate renewables into the grid and manage energy demand and supply intelligently to ensure a reliable energy supply to consumers. With the emergence of new technologies such as energy storage and smart energy management systems, there are exciting new opportunities for our countries and companies to better optimize available capacity. Energy storage is a game-changing technology that has the unique ability to store energy for later use. This can help to balance the peak and off-peak demand, so less infrastructure is needed to cater for peak demand. Energy storage systems, or ESS, can also help to manage intermittency from renewables and enhance the stability of our electricity grid. We see energy storage solutions as a key technology that will enhance our energy resilience, enable higher levels of solar power adoption, and to provide significant benefits to Singapore and Singaporeans. As such, Singapore's Energy Market Authority, EMA, is publishing a ESS policy paper to provide guidance on how ESS can be deployed in Singapore and clarity on its regulatory treatment. This paper will be continuously updated as new ESS business models and technologies emerge to ensure that Singapore's regulations remain up to date. EMA is also launching Accelerating Storage for Singapore program, or what we call ACCESS, to facilitate the adoption of ESS in Singapore. EMA will work with ACCESS partners to pilot use cases, design business models, and facilitate regulatory and market approvals for ESS deployment. The ACCESS program will kick off with 2 partners, PSA Corporation Limited, and Sembcorp Industries. Beyond ESS, we will need to catalyze R&D innovation in the distribution and consumption of energy to better manage our energy supply and demand. Singapore is an excellent location to serve as a test bed for new technologies and energy solutions in the region and beyond. One of our key advantages is that we are what we call in a Goldilocks position. Not too big, so that we can move fast, and not too small, so that we can scale up our solutions tested here to other global cities. We are also prepared to test out new rules and regulations to enable innovation to take place. And we welcome partners from all over the world to work with us on such innovations in technologies, policy regulations. We hope to attract many more industry partners and researchers to come to Singapore, to partner with Singapore companies and work with our people to develop new ideas that can become scalable and applicable to the rest of the world. To this end, the rapid urbanization of many cities across the world will present many business opportunities for us to test bed many of these new technologies, more sustainable technologies, more affordable technologies. In this slide, I'm pleased to also announce two collaborations which will build on our efforts to develop Singapore into a living lab. The first collaboration, called Exploiting Distributed Generation, or EDGE, is a 20 million program by EMA and the Singapore Institute of Technology, SIT, that will study urban microgrids and distributed generation technologies. The second collaboration is a renewal of the Sembcorp EMA partnership on R&D and manpower development. This collaboration, which started in 2014, will be renewed with a fresh injection of 10 million Singapore dollars. This partnership will spur the development and translation of energy R&D into solutions that address Singapore energy challenges and build new capabilities in our energy sector. To ensure that our R&D leads to commercially viable solutions, I'm happy to share that two such consortia comprising businesses and institutes of higher learning will be launched under the Energy Grid 2.0 R&D program. These are the Smart Grid and Power Electronics Consortium, Singapore, hosted by the Nanyang Technological University, and the Cooling Energy Science and Technology Singapore, hosted by the National University of Singapore. These consortia will enable companies and public researchers to collaborate on joint R&D and test bedding activities. They will also build up Singapore's capability to integrate different energy-related technologies into deployable system solutions that can be exported. Now let me touch on innovation in our energy consumption. We need to be much more efficient in the way we consume energy. Energy is a precious resource and we must constantly optimize the way we use it. In this regard, Singapore's main strategy is to focus on energy efficiency through design, urban planning, and the use of advanced materials. In particular, our industry sector consumes a significant amount of energy. Hence, we are rolling out an enhanced set of industry energy efficiency grant schemes to give a stronger push for industry facilities, including those of small and medium enterprises, to be more energy efficient. I'm pleased to announce that we will be introducing a new GENCO energy efficiency grant call to co-fund and incentivize greater efficiency in power generation. Deserving projects will be supported by up to 50% of the qualifying costs. This grant, the grant companies receive would correspond to the abatement achieved, and the projects that achieve significant abatement may be eligible for more support. More details will be shared later today by EMA, the Singapore Economic Development Board, and the National Environment Agency. In an increasingly carbon-constrained future, improving energy efficiency will do more than just help companies reduce their costs of production. More importantly, this can open up new competitive advantages and business opportunities, both locally and internationally. Our companies will also stand to benefit from a smaller base of carbon emissions and hence lower carbon tax liability. At a broader level, we can also look at the use of materials and design to reduce energy consumption. For example, can we design industrial complexes in such a way that they can leverage each other's waste heat? How about the type of building materials used? These are many interesting ideas available on the market. With increased collaboration between businesses, academia, as well as international dialogue partners, we can test bed many of these solutions here and share the learning points with our ASEAN partners and even to cities beyond. All of these ideas and innovation can only succeed if we have a pool of manpower equipped with the necessary skill sets and know-how to implement them well on the ground. Therefore, it's important for us that we can articulate the skill sets and progression opportunities to our existing and potential energy professions. With that in mind, EMA has partnered Skills Future Singapore and Workforce Singapore to develop the skills framework for energy and power. This framework maps out both the current and emerging skill sets across more than 120 job roles so that our workforce can continuously stay relevant and competitive. It is also a timely initiative that will prepare us to seize the upcoming opportunities in a rapidly evolving energy landscape. As the energy sector undergoes transformation, all of us, consumers, companies, and countries, stand to gain from the deployment of these new technologies. With better production, management, and consumption of energy, we can ensure a high quality of life and a vibrant economy for our people to greater access through cleaner, more affordable, and more reliable energy. There are limitless opportunities for businesses, researchers, government, and international community to work together, to innovate, to develop new technologies and new business models. So I end off with where I started. In Singapore, overcoming the energy challenge will be our next big audacious goal for the next 50 years. If the last 50 years has been a story of how we overcome our water scarcity, the next 50 years will be about how we overcome our energy challenges, how we together find solutions to ensure that we overcome the trilemma of making our energy supply affordable, sustainable, and renewable. And I welcome all of you to work with us and use the Singapore International Energy Week as a platform to invest, innovate, and integrate new energy solutions for our common future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. We invite you to remain on stage to witness the MOU signing between ASEAN and International Renewable Energy Agency. We'd also like to invite ministers from the ASEAN member states, ASEAN Secretary General, and the Director General of IRENA on stage to witness the signing. Your Excellencies, please. The ASEAN IRENA MOU facilitates the scaling up of renewable energy deployment in the region. This supports ASEAN's aspirational target to increase the share of renewable energy in the ASEAN energy mix by 23% before 2025. Today, ladies and gentlemen, EMA and SIT will sign a memorandum of agreement to mark the launch of EDGE. Now, for this segment, I would like now to invite on stage from the Energy Market Authority, Chief Executive Mr. Ngyam Shih-chun and Deputy Chief Executive Mr. Bernard Nee. Let's welcome them with a round of applause. From the Institute of Technology, President Professor Tan Thiam Soon, Vice President Industry and Community, Associate Professor Ivan Lee. EDGE is a $20 million exploiting distributed generation program focusing on next-generation grid technologies. EDGE will foster partnerships to develop capabilities in innovative distributed technologies and accelerate technology transfer. Thank you. We invite Mr. Chan, Mr. Ngyam, and Mr. Nee to remain on stage. Professor Tan and Professor Lee will return to their seats. And next, EMA and Sembcorp Industries are contributing more than $10 million to renew their partnership for R&D and manpower development. Coming up on stage right now from Sembcorp Industries is Mr. Matthew Friedman, Chief Digital Officer, and Mr. Sia King Boon, Vice President R&D Innovation. They're right here. The Memorandum of Agreement will catalyze innovation and develop capabilities through the Sembcorp EMA Technology Partnership and Sembcorp EMA Energy Challenge for another 4 years. Let's give the MOAs a big round of applause as well, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we continue the SIEW opening keynote address session, you may like to know is now open live in Pigeonhole. You can now start submitting and contributing your questions via this platform. The moderator and speakers will attempt to address some of these questions via this platform and, of course, doing the question and answer sessions. It is now with pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, that I invite Executive Director of International Energy Agency, IEA, for his keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Fatih Birol.
Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure to come back to Singapore. I was here exactly at this stage 2 years ago, 2016, where we mark the accession of Singapore to the International Energy Agency family as an associate member. I can tell you, Mr. Minister, Mr. Chang, that Singapore, within the last 2 years, has been one of the most active members of the IEA family. Many thanks for that. Also, I am delighted that the 36th ASEAN Energy Ministerial, all the ministers, called yesterday for a stronger institutional ties with the International Energy Agency. This is a great honor for us as we place a lot of importance to the ASEAN region for the reasons I am going to tell you in a few minutes. We were also very pleased that the ASEAN ministers asked the IEA to work with your countries, ASEAN countries, on power system integration with emphasis to renewable integration, energy efficiency, among other issues. So it's a great honor for us. We are looking forward to work with you towards the Thai presidency 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, before going to the ASEAN issues, I wanted to give you a bit of a highlight what we think about the global energy context. Big or small, every country in the world, ladies and gentlemen, I believe, is not an energy island. No country is an energy island. We all are affected from each other about the international energy market developments. So, couple of issues. First of all, oil prices, energy prices. The recent rise in the energy prices, now hovering around $80, close to $80, was not a good news for the consumers. Many of the countries in this region, their economies, their current account balance have been affected by that. And this comes, the high energy price, at a moment when the global economic momentum is slowing down. Therefore, it is important for all of us to have a common sense for the global oil markets so that the prices are at an affordable level for all, as it is not a good news for the consumers today, and I believe high prices may not be a good news for the producers tomorrow. So this is the first issue of today. Second, I wanted to highlight to you, from our perspective, 3 transformational changes in the global energy markets, which will affect all of us, we believe. First, on oil and gas, United States, which has been a major importer of oil many years, as a result of the shale revolution, US is now turning to be the undisputed leader of global oil and gas production for many years to come. And this will have a lot of implications for the market dynamics, energy security, and beyond. This will affect all of us, and I will talk to you about the gas markets in a moment. Second, solar PV, solar energy, is becoming the cheapest source of electricity generation in many, many countries, and as such provides an excellent opportunity for the countries in this region and beyond for the new power plants to be built. And the third, again, a very important transformational change, is the spectacular growth of electricity consumption in the world. Energy demand is growing in the entire world, but electricity demand is growing much higher than the energy demand. Taking this region as an example, this region, in the last 5 years, electricity consumption increased 3 times faster than the energy consumption as a result of the economic growth, digitalization, and others. So these are the 3 major transformations we think will affect everybody, all the countries around the world. The new role of United States in terms of oil and gas, renewables, but especially solar PV is getting cheaper, and the very strong penetration of electricity in our economies, in our energy sector. And coming to this very region, Southeast Asia, we believe our numbers show that together with China and India, this region will shape the global energy markets in the next years to come. Just to put it in a context, the electricity generation from this region in the next 20 years will add 1 Japan plus 1 Korea today. So ASEAN in the next 20 years will be current ASEAN plus Japan plus Korea, a very strong fleet of new power plants. I mentioned the gas markets, a very important fuel for this region for today, and even so in the next years to come, and the big transformation is happening in the gas markets, especially in the context of LNG. Up to now, we have seen 1 major player in the LNG markets, Qatar. But in the next 5 years, 2 other countries are joining to Qatar, namely Australia and the United States. And here, around 2020s, early 2020s, we will have 3 champions, Qatar, Australia, United States, providing more than 60% of the global LNG in the world. And when we look at the Qatar, which will be still a major player, with a major, very important exporting company, and with long-term contracts with different destinations. You have Australia with several companies exporting, and with the, again, long-term mainly oil index contracts, and United States with the hub index pricing and with the flexible destinations. And when you look at all these three major players, their intersection, as Minister Chang yesterday mentioned, is ASEAN region. All these three major LNG providers, their destination is intersecting around this region. And this, a lot of LNG coming to markets will provide more flexibility, shorter contracts, and less final destination clause. A major transformation in the global gas markets driven by LNG. On the demand side of the gas and LNG, we also see a very strong growth. We expect that within the 5 years of time, global LNG trade will reach around 500 BCM. Here, we expect the European and the others LNG will be more or less stable. Japan and Korea, again, more stable LNG consumption. The India and the others are growing very strongly, but the biggest growth comes from China. What we have seen in the oil markets some 10 years ago, China effect, we are now seeing in the LNG global gas markets. As we speak today, as we speak now, China is overtaking Japan as the largest gas importer of the world, mainly driven by the local pollution concerns. We expect, therefore, in this region and around the world, a strong growth of gas, which is opening a lot of opportunities to address the local air pollution issues and other environmental issues, and also provides opportunities for new technologies, such as hydrogen technology, which is a major focus for the next G20 going to take place in Japan next year. I was very happy to see that the ASEAN countries are more and more interested in the renewable energy. My heartfelt congratulations to Minister Chang, ASEAN ministers, and my dear colleague Adnan Amin for the MOU. Now, when we talk about the renewable energies, ladies and gentlemen, when we, in these meetings, in the newspapers, we mainly hear solar and wind. And they are making very strong penetration. About 95% of news and discussion, solar and wind. But, when you look at the numbers, what are the sources of renewable energies today? It gives us a bit of a different picture. Today, definitely, solar and wind contributes to the world renewable energy use, but the biggest growth or biggest share is modern bioenergy. 50% of the renewables today comes from modern bioenergy, and about 4% from solar and 6% from the others. So therefore, to put the things in a context, it is very important to note that the bioenergy is half of the renewables today. And there is a very strong future that we can make use of bioenergy in this very region in a sustainable way. Because the biggest penetration of wind and solar is today in the electricity generation. But electricity generation is only a small part of the total energy consumption. Electricity is only 20% of the total energy. 80% to penetrate this, we need also, in addition to solar and wind, other renewable energy sources such as bioenergy. Coming to the ASEAN countries. Now, when we look at this region, we think energy security will be more and more important in this region. I know from all the ministers I met yesterday that they put energy security at the top of their agenda, but I can assure you that our numbers show it will be even more important in the future. Why? Very simple. Oil production in the region is in a decline, whereas oil demand in the region is growing significantly as a result of the growth for aviation needs, trucks, petrochemicals, cars, and others. We think the region will be one of the most important oil importing regions in the world. In terms of natural gas, again, as I mentioned, demand is growing very strongly, and the region needs to import more and more natural gas. Even in the context of coal, even taking into account the huge coal resources of Indonesia, we think the region will be relying, slowly but surely, coal imports. To put all of them together, this very region's reliance on the international energy markets will be more and more important. The vulnerability of the changes in the international energy prices will be more important for the economies for this region. And as International Energy Agency, we are ready to work, once again I want to underline, with all these countries to secure that the energy supplies are in place and the energy security measures are put in place. So more and more vulnerability to the international energy markets. Investment. Minister Chang mentioned the key issue of investment. I mentioned to you that this region, in the next 20 years, the power plants, lots of power plants today, but we will need to add one Japan, one Korea, but for that we need investments. How much investments? Each year, this region needs to mobilize 50 billion US dollars, 50 billion. And when we look at the current trends, which we do at the IEA, we think the current trends are only half of the money that we need to invest, about 25 billion. So investment for the new power plants, but as important as that, investment for the power transmission and distribution lines. Therefore, our joint work with Singapore on the investment capacity training for hundreds of people in this very region, the mid-level policymakers, how to mobilize the investments, how to promote the investment in this region is of crucial value to us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, electricity demand is growing very strongly in this region, as we all know. What is the driver? Why electricity demand is growing so strongly? In our view, answer is one of the blind spots of global energy markets. Yes, industry sector, the lights and the applications in our iPhones and everything, it's a lot of electricity consumption, but the biggest growth comes from air conditioners. Air conditioner is the number one, I underline, number one driver of electricity demand growth in this region and in many developing countries. Same in India, the same in China, Africa, and elsewhere. It is the reason that the IEA made a recent report on the air conditioners and their significance in the electricity markets. In the United States and Japan, we have colleagues from US and Japan, they will tell you 90% of the households have an air conditioner unit, but in the ASEAN region, only 15% of the households have an air conditioner unit. With the increasing income levels, households will buy air conditioners to have a much more comfortable, productive lifestyles, which will drive the electricity demand growth. And here, important thing is the air conditioner units in this very region is unfortunately needs a lot of efficiency improvements. They are much lower than the international standards. Again, another mandate given to us by the ASEAN ministers to work on with the ASEAN countries. My final graph is about an issue that we have been discussing: carbon dioxide emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, carbon dioxide emissions every year increased year by year with the global economic growth, except for the when there's a financial crisis like the 2009. It increased every year, as you see here. But we were hopeful to see that 2014, 15, 16, while the global economy increased in a decent way, about 3%, global emissions remained flat. So we thought perhaps this is a turning point. But the year 2017 showed us that carbon emissions increased once again. We were again hopeful that perhaps this is a one-off trend, 2017 emissions increased. But now, based on the first 9 months of data of 2018, I am sorry to tell you that the 2018, this year, we expect CO2 emissions reaching record highs. At the IEA, we have all the energy data at our fingertips, and I can tell you that 2018 will see another increase of the CO2 emissions, and which tells me that there is a big disconnect between the targets we have, the reports, the objectives we have, and what is happening in the real life. In the real life, emissions are increasing, while the report's targets are asking for an immediate peak and decline of emissions. To finish my words, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to highlight once again, as I am highlighting the oil importing ministers, oil exporting ministers, my colleagues, that the high energy prices, high oil prices are hurting consumers, their economies, especially those who have some currency challenges as well. But let's do not forget, let's take a lesson from the history that high energy prices tomorrow may also hurt the producers, exporters as well. We are seeing an emergence of a much more competitive and getting more and more global gas markets thanks to LNG revolution, and there is a huge opportunity the Southeast Asian countries to make use of that. Energy investment, especially power sector investment, is perhaps the most critical issue in this very region, and especially for the countries whose electricity demand is growing very strongly, and with the renewables coming in the picture, integration of renewables in the electricity systems and getting money for that is very important, an area, again, we work with the countries here together. Growing renewables, bioenergy, geothermal, solar, wind can help to reduce the air pollution, local pollution in the cities, address CO2 emissions, and also reduce the energy imports. And therefore, it is very important, once again, congratulations to the determination of these countries to push both renewables and energy efficiency. Finally, ministers and dear colleagues, International Energy Agency is the global energy authority. We are very happy to assist all the ASEAN members to address their energy challenges with having the world's best data at our fingertips, looking at all the fields and all the technologies and providing you real world policy solutions for their daily business and strategic thinking. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Minister Chang.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now with pleasure that I invite Mr. John Abbott, Downstream Director and member of the Executive Committee from Shell, to deliver his keynote address. Mr. Abbott, please.
Thank you very much. So, Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It always is a pleasure to return to a region where I not only work for Shell, but I actually made my home in the 1980s. And how fitting it is to be here in Singapore, the Lion City. The very name suggests that as well as being a prosperous city, a city of sweeping parks and sophisticated policy, Singapore has courage too. Singapore has vision. And this is what the world truly needs now as we face up to a period of profound change. We need the courage to ask tough questions and the vision to seek those difficult answers and to say, we do not know every solution at this point in time, but we are working on it. That is why events like this, I believe, are so important. They give us the chance to bring people together, exchange ideas, and find solutions. I may be one of the speakers, but I am here to listen, to understand, and to learn. I'm here to discuss the big questions about the region's energy future, about the multiple solutions that society will need to meet demand, whilst reducing emissions and to tackle climate change and local air pollution. Indeed, as we have heard already, I believe we meet at a very critical moment. Earlier this month, the Intergovernment Panel of Climate Change outlined the need for an ever more rapid transition to a lower carbon world. The report actually is a reassessment of what the world must do to keep the planet healthy. And that begins with the CO2 emissions falling sharply from 2020. That's barely a year ago, and you've already seen in the previous presentation the current reality. The challenge comes in many forms. It touches every part of our lives and reaches into all industries. It involves every one of us, our societies, our markets, our governments, and in no other area can you see all the issues at work better than in the future of transport. So, how do we do things differently? How do we transform energy? The theme of the conference, as you well know, is invest, innovate, and integrate. And it reflects my answer to the question. There is not one solution, but actually many. So whether we are talking about Indonesia's plan to phase out petrol and diesel cars by 2040, or China's use of liquefied natural gas for transport, or the smart cities in Vietnam last month at the World Economic Forum, or even Singapore's vision for a city of cyclists and pedestrians, of an intelligent transport system. And whether we're talking about any of those, I believe we need every solution we can get, because no one solution can meet all needs at all places and at all times. That is a certainty, a conclusion of Shell's latest scenario work, which was cited in this month's IPCC report. Our Sky Scenarios, as we call it, sets out a challenge, but we believe plausible route the world could follow to meet the aims of the Paris Agreement, and indeed restrict the rise of global average temperature in the century to well under 2 degrees C. We all have to show courage and vision. We must be open to unprecedented and sustained collaboration. And the transport sector, I believe, will certainly have to rise to that challenge. Today, transport accounts for more than a quarter of the world's energy use and 1/5 of global energy-related CO2 emissions. In the world of Sky Scenario, every new passenger car sold could be electric by 2050. Battery electric cars and lighter vehicles will certainly have a very big part to play in reducing emissions and achieving those aims that I've just described. But that's not all we need. We need alternatives for heavy freight, for shipping, and for aviation. And batteries do not provide obvious answers for those sectors yet. Indeed, I've heard lorry drivers joke that if they had to run on batteries, the batteries would be so big that they'd have to choose between carrying freight or the battery, but certainly not both. We need to be broad in our thinking. The Asia-Pacific region has already done, I believe, much to change its energy mix. But as coal continues to increase and air quality worsens, much more is needed. We need to work together. And in fact, Shell, in many ways, I would say, is heading on the same path towards a transport system of many solutions. So take the example of battery electric cars. China today accounts for about half of the global production. It now has the most electric vehicles on the road, ahead of even the United States of America. Indonesia has introduced incentives for electric cars on imports and battery manufacturing. In Singapore, the ride-hailing app Grab will start using 200 new electric vehicles from next year. And Shell is also increasing its involvement too. We opened our first Shell recharge station in China last month, and that builds upon significant successes that we've had in the United Kingdom and the Netherlands doing the same thing. We also have a network of Ionity fast chargers and New Motion smart chargers across a significant part of Europe. The same is true of hydrogen as a fuel, which has the potential to serve heavy freight, including rail. In Japan, their vision of a hydrogen society actually begins in 2020, with plans for fleets of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles serving the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Shell too is growing its investment in hydrogen. With Shell's hydrogen mobility joint venture in Germany, it plans for a nationwide network of 100 filling stations in that country by 2019. We also have hydrogen refueling stations today in the United Kingdom and Canada, and our latest plans include developing 3 refueling stations for trucks serving the port of Los Angeles. And as we can all see, the advantages of natural gas as a transport fuel in trucking and shipping. China has the world's largest fleet of vehicles running on liquefied natural gas. And the number of LNG trucks is rising. Last year, 96,000 were produced in China alone. And in addition to that, Shell has made moves into LNG for shipping. For example, supplying Carnival, the cruise liner, but also having a relationship with Sovcomflot. And both Shell and the region recognize the true potential of advanced biofuels. With responsible management, we see how they could help the aviation sector in the future. In Indonesia, the B20 regulation is a positive step towards the country's emission reduction targets. And as many of you will know, Shell today is one of the biggest producers and blenders of biofuels globally. And that is supported by our joint venture Raízen in Brazil, which produces 2 billion litres a year of sugarcane-based ethanol, but also second-generation biofuels, which are co-located with their facilities. And we're also working on advanced biofuels such as IH² in India, where our commercial pilot plant today is producing drop-in fuels from waste, both municipal and wood type of waste. And I think we all understand the digitalization is opening up many other solutions and avenues. We see a future in which autonomous vehicles are connected and working as fleets. It is a future of innovative business models, from ride-sharing to mobility on demand. It's a future we could see actually on the streets of Singapore with its innovative transport plan. Indeed, the finalists of our startup program, which we call Idea Refinery, came up with a potential solution for wireless charging of electric vehicles and a hydrogen battery-powered scooter. Now, the advances that we are seeing in digitalization, they can be seen everywhere. In the Philippines, in Manila, Shell has developed Connected Freight, which uses sophisticated route optimization technology to make inner-city deliveries more efficient. And we now plan to extend this to other cities in this region, including Singapore. And Shell has innovations such as FitCar, which is artificial intelligence within the car to optimize fuel usage and the maintenance of the vehicle. TapUp, where more conventional fuels can be delivered to a customer's home. And Fair Pilot, which is about leveraging and supporting ride sharing. Shell is also now testing new business models using smart charging to help customers avoid charging their vehicles at peak times, when of course costs are high. And it is by offering customers innovations such as these that we ensure our long-term competitiveness is also sustained. But the reality is that many of these solutions will take time. We all have a lot of work to do, but we must all start as well to make the best of the technology that we actually have today. So, as much as people don't want to hear this, do not write off the internal combustion engine just yet. Shell's work continues to improve fuels and lubricants, and together with the car makers and policy makers, we can continue to improve the efficiency of today's engines quite considerably. And in shipping, Singapore is one of 3 ports where Shell is testing our new very low sulfur fuel oil. So here in the city of courage, in the city of vision, the city that heads the ASEAN nations this year, I return to that big question that I posed right at the beginning. How will we transform energy? We will not do it with one solution, but with many. We need to continue to work together as we make many solutions, not just a dream, not just a promise, but make those solutions a reality. But therefore, we need to keep talking. We need to keep listening, and we all need to keep learning. When I was in London this summer, we discussed hyperloops and ride sharing. In China in August, it was artificial intelligence and transport as a service. In Berlin last week, it was hydrogen and the future of the internal combustion engine. Today, indeed, I'm in Singapore, and I will take what I learned today from you to San Francisco early in the next part of 2019. So I actually want this dialogue to continue. I want to keep listening. There is much we can all gain from deepening our partnership, and I'm looking forward to doing so with you today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. And from the City of Courage, we say thank you, sir. Thank you. We invite you to take the center stage right now, as we would now like to invite back up on stage Dr. Fatih Birol for this session. And moderating this Q&A session, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Sri Jagaraja, anchor and correspondent of CNBC. Good to see you again, Sri. Now, do continue, ladies and gentlemen, to pose your questions via Pigeonhole at www.pigeonhole.at/SIEW 2018. We also have mic handlers in the house. I'm going to hand over the fort to Sri. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction, and thank you to John and Fatih for setting the stage for us. And I thought that there was some cause for concern, especially, Fatih, when you refer to the 9 months of data, which really do suggest some backsliding on emissions targets, which we will get into, and we'll talk about what that implies for 2019. But I thought that there was some cause for optimism as well. John, you talked about how Shell is trying to future-proof the industry, so it's not necessarily a sunset industry as some describe oil and gas and hydrocarbons as. But I just wanted to pick up on what you said about not writing off the internal combustion engine anytime soon. You're doing a lot of work on future-proofing, as you pointed out, but you've got to imagine that at some point, oil and gas is going to go into a structural decline, especially when you consider the tipping point in which electric vehicles displace the internal combustion engine. When do you think that tipping point really arises?
I mean, the reality is we don't know. And I think we have to be prepared, both as a society and as industry, to make available all of those forms of energy. Because the transition will take place, the transition should take place. The reality is it will take place at different paces in different countries. And that's something, as I've traveled around to all of the countries that I mentioned earlier, I am seeing this pace of transition being very variable from country to country, and even within a region from country to country. And that's why as Shell, yes, we are continuously improving our gasoline, our diesel, our lubricants, but we are moving into electrical charging, LNG, biofuels, and hydrogen, because we want to move at least at the pace of society and make those options available for society. And I think that's the important thing. People are not going to switch technology unless the energy supply is there and readily available. And that's why, in some respects, we are moving ahead of the curve.
Fatih.
Now, to be honest with you, I believe, once again, there is a disconnect between what is happening in the markets and what we read in newspapers. You are right. Electric cars are year by year breaking records. For example, last year, there was a record sales of electric cars, but it was less than 1% of the all car sales, first of all. Now, we have calculated last year, 1 out of 100 was electric cars. If there was a big jump, we decide here the powerful ASEAN countries and all the US, Japan, UK, and the others, as of tomorrow, not 1 out of 100, but if every second car, 50% of the cars were electric cars, what would happen to oil demand? Global oil demand will still continue to grow because the driver of the global oil demand is not cars. It is petrochemical industry, trucks, aviation, and the others. What happens in the car industry alone will not be leading us to a peak oil demand anytime soon, so that we will be living with oil for some time to come, whatever happens in the automotive industry.
But even in those transport sectors that you described, Fatih, and John, you were talking about this, there is a conversation about substitution, there is a conversation about alternative, less polluting fuels. And I'm just wondering if you can give me a line on shipping and IMO 2020, the sulfur cap, and tighter fuel regulations. Where do we stand on that? Is the supply chain ready? Is the shipping industry ready? Is Shell ready for that?
Yeah, I think we have to look at this product quality specification change as probably the biggest the industry has seen for many decades. I mean, I have been in this business now in Shell for 37 years, and personally, this is the biggest change I have seen. And in Shell, we have been talking about this probably for about 5 years. I think there were many people who thought it would not happen, or it would get deferred, or something else would happen. The reality is it is happening, and I think there is no doubt we will see disruption in the market. But again, you know, if I look at my own company, the intention is to make all of the fuels available, because different shippers will be in different places using different technologies. I think, you know, in the last few months and weeks, there's been quite a surge on scrubbers we will make the fuel oil available for those ships that still have scrubbers. LNG, we've talked already a lot about LNG today, is a very attractive low sulfur fuel option for shipping as well as marine gas oil. The important thing is that companies like Shell, and we are very ready to do this, provide that basket of fuels in all of the major ports.
I thought what you both said about the prospects for hydrogen, especially the progress that's being made in Japan and this 2020 target for the fleet during the Olympics was very interesting. What sort of momentum are we seeing for hydrogen technology as a fuel source, as an alternative fuel source outside Japan? And what sort of incentives does it need?
In fact, last week I was in Japan, in Tokyo, and Japanese government organized the very first hydrogen, international hydrogen ministerial meeting. And after Minister Seko, I was giving the opening slot there. And as I mentioned there is a huge future for hydrogen because I see very few examples in the energy business that all countries are supporting one single technology, because in some cases, some people like nuclear, others don't. Some people like renewables, others don't. But everybody is on board here. Producers, consumers, there are different drivers here. Some people want to see how we can make more use of renewable energies, wind, for example, in Europe. Some others want to use the fossil fuels, such as the natural gas. And the drivers are diverse. It is the environmental issues, it is energy security, diversification of the energy mix. And I was very happy to see that Prime Minister Abe decided to make the hydrogen one of the key topics of the next year's G20 of Japan. And I expect a strong endorsement and some strong policy imperatives coming from Japan next year. So hydrogen is a technology we have to keep a close eye on.
How can we make it cost competitive, though, John?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because I was going to add to Fatih's point that indeed I was in Tokyo and got the same sentiment a few weeks ago. Perhaps more compelling, I was in Berlin last week, as I mentioned, with the ministers there, and hydrogen is clearly on their agenda. And I think we should look at hydrogen not only as a fuel, but also as a means of storing electricity, as opposed to batteries, because we can take electricity, whether it's from solar panels, whether it's from wind, we electrolyze water, and we can store hydrogen, not over days, not over weeks, but maybe over months, and even to manage those seasonal shifts in energy demand. But as you quite rightly say, one of the challenges around hydrogen is the cost. But I have a degree of confidence as that we start to scale up hydrogen, we start to commercialize it, it will come down the cost curve. I think the reality is, in a number of countries, funding has been put preferentially into battery technology. If we increase that investment in hydrogen and hydrogen technology, it will come down the cost curve.
Let me iterate once again, I have rarely seen such a coalition of the countries around the world on a single technology, and it's a very important chance for all of us addressing the challenges for climate change, energy security, and diversification of our energy mixes.
But right now, for EVs, lithium seems to be the default choice. Does that continue?
EVs, electric cars, you mean? Yeah, electric cars are definitely the choice, but once again, let's put two things in a context. The EV sales today are less than 1% of total car sales. And when it comes to trucks, there is, as John mentioned, his chat with a lorry driver. It's good that the Shell executives discuss with the lorry drivers from time to time to have what's happening in the ground. Congratulations, John. It's a huge, huge challenge in the electrification of the trucks, the freight, and the others. And I believe electric cars will grow, but they will not make a big dent in the global oil demand and the CO2 emissions. Electric cars are good for the local pollution in the cities, but not a major impact on the CO2 emissions, as they need to use electricity to fuel the cars, and the bulk of the electricity generation comes from fossil fuels.
And I think you have to ask yourself, why have motor manufacturers probably moved preferentially to battery electric vehicles? I think with the tailpipe emission standards that have been put out there in very short order, the reality is that battery electric vehicles are the cheapest way today of meeting those tailpipe standards. It doesn't mean that's going to be the case for the longer term. It's very much driven by those timelines, where the motor manufacturers, of course, have to try and make money as well in the interim period.
Let's go back to the bad news. And
Which one? I have lots of it.
you do indeed, but I wanted to talk about the backsliding on the emissions targets for this year. For the first 9 months, we're back to record CO2 emissions globally. What's causing that backsliding, Fatih? Is it global economic growth? If there are downside risks for the global economy next year, then by default, do those emission rates come down? What's behind that backsliding, and what have you got in store for 2019 and the emissions rates for next year?
I think we have to, very good question. We have to put things in a context. Last year, we have seen the record installation of the renewables and the record increase of the emissions. So which means only with renewables we cannot fix this problem. One of the things which didn't go well last year was the improvements in energy efficiency. Energy efficiency improvements was very poor, if any, last year. And in the year 2017, for example, previous year, we see a major replacement of coal by natural gas in the United States. But this year, 2018, this was not so impressive. What needs to be done? Very simple. We need renewable energy, we need energy efficiency, and we need large-scale carbon capture and storage. This is very important because fossil fuels, I mean, you like it or not, but they are here. You may remember, you are a very distinguished the energy reporter. There was a very famous Norwegian Prime Minister, Brundtland, Madame Brundtland. 30 years ago, she made a report at the request of UN Secretary General, which called Sustainable Development. She brought the concept for the first time. 30 years ago, when she made this report, the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix was 81%, 81, 30 years ago. And the idea was reducing the share of fossil fuels. And after 30 years, all these changes, renewables are growing, more energy efficient technology, everybody is becoming green, including the companies and so on. That 81% after 30 years, today, the share of fossil fuels in the energy mix is still 81%, no change. So therefore, if we want to fix our problem for climate change, we have to make more use of carbon capture and storage, and in some countries where it is acceptable, in my view, nuclear power.
Let me just follow up on that, and we have to wrap things up, and my apologies for not being able to get to questions on the floor, but I really wanted to ask both of you a burning question that I have, and that is coal. Within the Asian context, despite this push towards decarbonisation and the Paris climate change goals, etc., is proving very, very hard to budge. Yes, it is cheap, yes, it is abundant, but it's inefficient, and as we know, it's highly polluting. It comes down to having a price for carbon, an evaluation metric, doesn't it? Why are we not there yet?
And I think you well know that Shell has been a strong advocate to have a market price on a market price on carbon. We've been advocating that in many countries, and the more progressive countries are moving with that. In an ideal world, of course, we would have a global price for CO2. And the reality is that once certain areas or regions put a price on CO2, then we get carbon leakage and industry starts to move around and somewhat circumvent that. But I think the faster that every country and every region can put a price on CO2, that will inevitably drive decarbonisation of the energy system. That is something that I think we have to continue to drive for and implement, and just acknowledge that it's not going to happen in all places at the same time, regrettably, but that is what will make the difference.
I would say that the carbon price is a very good idea, but in my view, if you have in one country and put a carbon tax, and increase the energy prices, it would create a challenge for this country vis-à-vis the other country which does have a carbon price. So the competitiveness of the country with a carbon price would go down. And as such, I think in today's context, international context, I don't see an international carbon price implemented, to be very frank. This is number one. Number two,
there's no one-size-fits-all at this stage.
I don't think so. And this about coal. Now, coal is different in different regions. In coal plants in Europe and in United States are rather old plants. But in Asia, we have a very young fleet, close to 2,000 gigawatts. And it is about 10 years old, the average age. And the plant time is about 50 years old. So therefore, it is very important that we have to find the clean coal technologies, including carbon capture and storage, to find a compromise between the cheap energy and also the taking care of the environmental challenges we have in front of us.
And just to reinforce Fatih's point again, if I go back to my home country, the UK, again, the solution is different in different countries. They introduced a floor price on coal, and that has carbon, and that ultimately resulted in the phasing out of a lot of coal for power generation. In fact, there are some days in the summer in the UK now where 100% of the electricity generation is from renewables. So without that global price on carbon, each individual country will have to work out what is best for itself to achieve that objective.
And to make note, the UK and the ASEAN countries are completely different in terms of economic development level and economic air conditions. Yeah.
Hence, we need a specific market mechanism for each country. Gentlemen, we'll have to wrap it up there. I'm so sorry to the audience and for the people who contribute in Pigeonhole that we couldn't get to it, but we were quite short on time. But Fatih and John are available for the duration of today, I believe, and I'm sure you can catch up with them over the course of the event. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining and listening. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you.
And thank you, Sri, for moderating this very efficiently. Indeed, there'll be around, ladies and gentlemen, who'd like to pose your questions during the break. You may feel free to do so as well. Now, we'd like to have you remain in your seats at this point in time as our VIPs will take their leave for this break. Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll invite you shortly to proceed to the foyer for our SIEW opening reception. Now, do take this opportunity to visit the various exhibits and not to forget to leave a short video message or photo quote at SIEW Live. For those joining us at the Energy Summit, do take note, it'll be right here at 11 a.m. at 11 a.m. sharp in this ballroom. But we need to refresh the ballroom, so we seek for your cooperation and kind assistance to take all of your belongings with you. Everything that you have with you must be taken out of this ballroom as we'll do a major refresh of this entire arena. So we'd like to thank you for your kind patience, ladies and gentlemen. It is now time for the SIEW opening refreshments served on the outside. Thank you and see you back here at 11 a.m. Thank you.